Singasibheke paragraph 27 westatement ska general triple H3.
For the record, it reads, I should add to what I say in paragraph 48 of my original statement that we had no visual aids at the JOC and relied on radio and cell phone reports on what was happening on the ground. I thought I would be in a better position to give guidance as overall commander if I could see what was happening from the sky. I cannot say precisely what time we left, but we had not yet received reports at the JOC of how the operation was proceeding. Major General Mpembe, where you refer to visual aids in that paragraph, what do you mean?
General Nukonda, xa usithi ufuna uncedo lwemiboniso kula paragraph ibifundwa, ungabe ubuthethe ukuthini?
CCTV camera.
Benthetha ngama CCTV cameras.
That could cover the whole area of operation.
Ezo zazingabonisa yonke indawo kwakusenzeka kuwo lo msebenzi.
Major General Mpembe, that's because there was a CCTV feed in the JOC, which we can see in photograph triple H 36 displayed on those two screens. Your point in your supplementary statement was that you wanted more than what those two screens were displaying, correct?
Chair, in fairness to the witness, our learned friend should say what time these photographs were taken and which period they cover.
Mr. Chairperson, they're taken at 7:30 in the evening of the 16th.
Njengoba befuna ukuqonda umnumzana ungalwani bazi jongiselele kuxesha liphi ezo. Uyatsho ke umnumzana Chekelson uba kwakungexesha lo 7:30 emalanga.
Was moving, then the major areas which were not covered were not there. And then that's what I was talking about. But probably it could have been better for me if I would also see not only those areas that could have been covered by the CCTV camera, because the Commission will recall that the chopper that I had, it was also covering far away areas which were not even covered by the other choppers.
Peru, before you continue, I don't know if you've had opportunity to look at Triple G 19, which is a statement by Mr. Buertes, who was the security risk manager at London, who was in the JOC. And in paragraph 57, he deals with the CCTV surveillance equipment which was in the JOC at the relevant time, around about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I don't know if you have got it available to you, but if you look at it, you will see that the question you're asking may well be answered on the basis of what is contained there.
Yes, thank you, Chair, for that assistance. The point of my question was to clarify with Major General Mpembe when he referred to visual aids in his statement that he was referring to the CCTV TV footage, and I can move on from that point now. Major General Mpembe, when did you make the decision to go up in the helicopter on the 16th?
Ingaba General Mpembe wasathatha yini isigqibo sokuba unyuke ngehelicopter ngomhla we-16 ku-August?
I did testify that it was after the 13:30 meeting, but it was not immediately thereafter. And I think in terms of my evidence in chief is clearly covered there.
Njengoba ndike ndatsho ngaphambili uba kwakusemva kwecala emva kwentsimbi yokuqala i-meeting yayibanjwe apho kodwa kwangekho emva kwayo ngqo exesheni nje emveni koko.
Major General Mpembe, what I'd now like to do is summarize where we are after this morning's cross-examination on this theme of the limited amount of contemporaneous evidence that is available to the Commission. That's my characterization of it. So just to summarize where we are. With respect to minutes, we have the 3 the 3 sets of minutes that are TT3, TT4, and Exhibit EE, but we've identified at least 6 other meetings that are not minuted. With respect to contemporaneous notes, we have only the collated occurrence book, not the notes that were kept and then put together in the document that we have, and we have no other notes from the JOC, whether they made their way into the occurrence book or not. With respect to an intelligence report, we have only TT5. With respect to the plans, we have only SS3. Then we have the SAP 15s, which in a piece of cross-examination that will be put to other witnesses, there is evidence that even those weren't completed on the 16th. And with respect to the pocketbook entries, certain of those have been, the Human Rights Commission team has been able to go through those. There are, however, still about 200 of those that still need to be reviewed. And then there are, of course, the case dockets that were prepared in that week of the 9th to the 16th of August. So other than these documents that I've just identified now in the summary, you don't know, and the one SMS that you will be providing tomorrow, you don't know of any other contemporaneous documents that are still outstanding and could be provided to the Commission, correct?
General ngaphandle kwengxelo ezisinazo apha phambi kwethu imizuzu yemeeting ezazeza
Fair, I'm not sure this witness has been concerned with the documents. There are other members of the SAPS, I think, who have been responsible for the documents and have been responding to queries and so on relating to the documents. Is that correct, Major Member?
Correct, Chairperson.
You weren't the clerk of the papers as far as the SAPS were concerned in this matter, were you?
Correct, Chairperson.
ngokwemibhalo nengxelo ezazibhalwa phansi asiqondi uba ugeneral anganolwazi lona kuba wayengajonganga nayo loo nto yokubhala.
Major General Mpemba, are you aware of any other documents that were produced at the time?
Ngaba general kukhona amanye amaphepha abhaliweyo mhlawumbe ungabe unowazi engavezwanga kweli xesha?
Not on my personal knowledge.
Hayi akekho awaziyo.
Major General, I'd now like to move on to the topic of training. You'll agree with me that your expertise as the overall commander is a combination of the training you've received and your experience, correct?
General, xa sibheka ubuchwepheshe bakho siyazi uba kudibanisa ukuqeqeshwa kwakho kunye namava akho ngokomsebenzi. Ngaba kunjalo?
In addition with those crowd managements that I've managed.
Ewe udibanisa nalo msebenzi yokulawula uninzi lwabantu endiwenzile.
And you'll agree with me that there's, of course, a difference between what you learn when you do training and what you learn from experience by being in command of an operation.
Ungavumela nami xa ndithi kukhona umehluko phambi kwento oyifundayo xa uqeqeshwayo nanto oyifundayo xa usenza umsebenzi njenge-operation.
Chair, the issue of the Major General's experience and training has already been covered previously, and Ms. Jele also dealt with it with another witness.
The fact that Ms. Jenny dealt with another witness doesn't prevent it being asked now, but it has been dealt with previously. So unless there's a special point that you want to put dealing with that, which hasn't been covered before, I don't think we should just plough over that field again. Do you agree?
Chair, I don't intend to plough over the field that has already been ploughed. What I do intend to do is cover the propositions that Mr. White deals with when he addresses the question of training and leadership experience.
Do that as succinctly as you can, because the substance in Mr. Luana's basic objection.
Uqeqesho namava kageneral into ebesike sadlula kuyo akwento siba singabuza kuyo kwakhona kungokutsho kwamnumzana ongalwane. Kodwa ke uMiss Lero uthi khona imibuzo esafuna ukuyibuza ngokuya ngokwengxelo kaMnumzana White.
In fact, Madlanga dealt with that issue, Chairperson.
Umnumzana ongalwane yalungisa ithi umnumzana Madlanga
Madlanga dealt with it in relation to what Mr. White had said, so I think he's only going to do it in relation to that. I'll allow that, but not in more than that. We've got his CV, which contains all his experience. in Exhibit H2, which has been extensively covered. Perhaps you may wish to put a couple of short, crisp points based on what Mr. White says in the light of that, but I don't know that we need to have more than that to help us.
Chair, I don't intend to cover what Advocate Madlanga covered with respect to the Major General's CV. Major General, what I want to understand is the difference between what you learn when you undergo training and what you learn from experience on the job. And would you agree with me that what you learn from training would be best practice? That would be the global best practice that the SAP says it adheres to. That's what you would learn when you went through a training course. And then obviously on the job, you're learning whatever it is that you learn from the particular operation that you were involved in. Will you agree with me that there are two types of things you're going to learn?
Generally ungavumela nami xa ndithi kunomehluko xa siya ngokwazi kwakho ngoqeqesho ulwazi olufumanayo xa uqeqeshwa kuba yilento iye ibekwe phansi ngokwemiqathango ebekwayo ibe nomehluko kunento oyifunda xa usenza umsebenzi uya ngokwehlukana kwemisebenzi ojongene nayo ngelo xesha.
In training is theory, in practice is what also you can come up with best practice.
Xa usekuqeqeshwa kuba into nje esathethwayo xa sekuyenza ke ngoku kuba khona okunye okuvezayo mhlambe obungakho ngophaya kwi-theory.
And you underwent riot control training in the 1980s and not since, and that's been established, correct?
Uqeqesho lokusebenza ngabantu wawulenze kumnyaka wo-1980 azange
You have to put it to him as a question. It's based upon his CV. You can just put it to him as an assertion and carry on. If he disagrees with the assertion, he can deal with it. But, to put something that's already common cause and say that's correct, I know that's a way some people like to cross-examine, but it's not really necessary. You can just make the statement and move on. And if he doesn't like the statement, he can quarrel with you. But then if you've got it already in his CV, then he'll have difficulty if he quarrels with the statement. So I suggest you just put the statement and then move on to your point.
Ngokutsho kwamhlekazi omhlale ngaphambili uyacela ke uba kungaphindwa into ekhona njengoba ibhaliwe ku-CV yakhe uba ngaba kunento mangayibeke ngaphambili akwazi ukuyiphikisa uyayiphikisa avuma uyayivuma.
Major General Mpembe, do you know whether best practice in public order policing has changed since you underwent training in the late 1980s?
Ingaba general unolwazi mhlawumbe ukuthi indlela ekwenziwa ngayo lawula uninzi lwabantu kukho okuchintshile kusukela ngalo xesha wawutrainwe ngalo ngabo-1980.
Correct, Chairperson, I did testify on that one.
Mhlala ngaphambili ndinikile ubungqina kwelo cala.
And indeed, the SAP's own crowd management for section members policy document on crowd management, which is before the Commission as Exhibit FFF1, records that international best practice has changed substantially since the 1980s. So my question for you, Major General Mpembe, is although your training remains valid, as you testified previously, it's not up to date with the most current idea of best practice, either globally or for the SAPs, correct?
Nangona uqeqesho lwakho lusekhona kuselulo lusevumelekile kodwa aluhamiselani notshintsho olukhona ukuya ngokwamaxesha ekuyeni ukulawuleni kwabantu.
Not correct, Chairperson, and my actions in terms of the objective evidence bears evidence to that, and the approach that we adopted for Marikana. And in addition, I know that Mr. White has wrote a lot in terms of Marikana, but there are two situations. He only based his opinion on the Regulations of Gatherings Act, which brought drastic changes. And he did not elaborate on the mutual agreement where the two parties they had to undergo to ensure the peaceful march. And as a result of that, Marikana was not falling under the regulations of gatherings. As we said, it was not only purely crowd management. It was the mix. And I have a very much high respect for Mr. White. But in terms of the South African approach, there is a lot that we need also to put, because he only concentrated on the regulations of gatherings, but not particularly on the practical what was happening on the day.
Akunjalo mhlali ngaphambili njengoba ndisisho nangendlela esasiyesayihlangabezana ngayo imeko yasemarikane yena umnumzana White nangona ndimhlonipha kangako ubheke kakhulu ngokuya ngokwemiqathango ebekuwe phansi akabheki njengemo ebekuye kuthi kuvunyelwane phakathi kwamaqela awo ahlangane nangendlela ekwenziwe ngayo kuleyo ndaba yasemarikane.
In addition, his experience in terms of the crowd management, when we compare Belfast and South Africa, it's a huge difference.
Kwaye nayo amava wakhe athetha ngawo akalinganiseli nala besijongene nawo kule yasemarikane xa sinokujonga nakumzekelo waseBelfast.
Major General Mpembe, it's not necessary for me to debate Mr. White's experience with you, but I would still like an answer to my question, which was, you accept that best practice, both internationally and as recorded in SAP's own documents, has changed since you were trained in the late 1980s, and you have not received formal training since that change.
In fairness, my learned friend should point us to the SAB's prescripts that says what she alleges to the witness.
Umnumzana ngalano uyacela ke uba uMiss Leroux asikhombise apho ibhale phansi lento azama ukubuza ngayo.
Chair, the point is not whether there's an obligation to retrain. The point is simply he has not been retrained since SAPS and global best practice has changed. That's a very simple and the only point I'm trying to make.
No, Chair.
Inqakwalibekayo uMiss Leroux kulelo inqakwalibekayo uMiss Leroux lelo kuba akazange aphinda aqeqeshwe nangona kubekho utshintsho olukhulu kwindlela ekusetshenzwa ngayo.
The premise for the question is that in SAB's own prescripts, international best practice has changed substantially. In fairness to the witness, our learned friend needs to refer to the excerpt in the SAB's prescripts on which he or she relies.
Ewe uyavuma mnumzana ngalwana uba ukutshintsha olukhulu lube khona kwilizwe lonke jikelele ngendlela okusetshenzwa ngawo ngamaphoyisa kodwa uyacela uba aboniswe kumaphepha ayisabs apho ukho into echoyo uba bekufanele uba kubekho uqeqesho lela abakhona.
Chair, I had thought it was common cause and I was trying to save some time, but I'm happy to do that. In Exhibit FFF1, it commences with an introductory section which says, as a result of the vast socio-political changes that have occurred in South Africa over the past few years, new approaches, tactics and techniques must be developed to align the management of crowds with the democratic principles of transparency and accountability. Police action must also be reconciled with the Bill of Human Rights and the statutory provisions pertaining to crowd management. The findings of the Goldstone Commission on Public Violence and Intimidation and the subsequent Regulation of Gatherings Act number 205 of 1993 were taken into consideration when this document was drawn up. The emphasis has shifted from the control of crowds in the past to the philosophy of crowd management, where fundamental rights of all citizens are taken cognizance of. To put these changing circumstances into perspective, it's important to regard the recent history of crowd control/management in South Africa. This history includes the following. Then there are 5 points that are recounted. Again, I'm trying to progress, so I'll skip over those. Then says the changing circumstances place a high premium on the fundamental rights of the individual. This requires the South African Police Service to change and adapt its tactics and strategies according to the circumstances so that the SAPS, without forfeiting its ability, will still be able to prevent violence effectively during gatherings and marches. The goals of the Public Order Police are the following. It then announces many of those. It then announces the principles of crowd management, situational appropriateness, optimization, proportionality, then gets into details relating to the preparation for crowd management operations and the like. So it is common cause and is recorded in SAP's own document that best practice has changed.
No.
To return to my question, Major General Mpembe, I'm correct that you have not received formal training in the new approach.
That's not correct, Chair. There is nowhere where our learned friend has just read which says that international best practice have changed substantially. She needs to rephrase her question.
Umnumzane ongalwana uyala uthi umbuzo mawubuze ngonyunye uhlobo not olwalubuze ngawo.
Chair, the change in global best practice not only comes from Mr. White, it also is recorded in the SAP's own expert, Mr. Derova's statements. But let me just start with the change. Let me rephrase my question so that it only relates to the change in South African practice. Major General Mpembe, I'm correct that you have not received training since the late 1980s in the new approach to crowd management to be followed by the SAPs.
Ingaba general nyanisile xa nithi azange ufumane uqeqesho ukusukela ekupheleni ko-1980 phaya uqeqesho olutsha olubhekene nemeko ezintsha ziyamiselana norhulumente omtsha.
Not correct, Chairperson. I did testify that head office by that time, immediately when, after the Goldstone Commission of Inquiry, and also the Standing Order 262 was made. And head office went out to all the provinces to train us in terms of the changes and bring the changes to the attention of all of us. And with regard to the human rights, there were various courses that I have undergone in terms of human rights courses and ensuring that human rights are being upheld in SABC. And it is also in my CV.
Akuvinjalo mhlekazi ngiye ndatsho nangaphambili emva kwe-Goldstone Commission nasemva kokuba kubekwe lo mthetho we-Standing Order 262 abe-head office yethu yesipolisa bajikeleze amaphondo onke behamba beqeqesha amalungu amapolisa kwaye nakwimaqeqesho akhona e-human rights kukhona into yanendawo angenelela.
Major General Mpembe, you haven't had any, from what I've seen on your CV, I haven't seen any formal training on how to command a public order operation of the type at Marikana with multiple units. Have you received such training?
General, ngoba ndingakhange ndibone kwi-CV yakho azange ufumane uqeqesho olokuba ukwazi ukulawula indawo enjengale apho inekomanda ezininzi.
Is my little friend suggesting that there is such training, Chair?
Asking, have you had such training? She's not suggesting whether the training is available or not. She's just asking as a fact, have you attended training? Have you had any special training in dealing with a situation such as there was in Marikana, where various units, special task team people, reaction people, and national intervention units and POP people all had to operate together to combat a problem such as was encountered in America? Have you ever attended a course on that?
General,
received training on that?
Ingaba khona uqeqesho kwalufumana apho kuzobe kudibene amaqela ngamaqela amapolisa ama-POP TFT njalo njalo apho bazosebenza ngaxeshanye besenza umsebenzi wami.
Chairperson, with regard to the functioning of different units, one can say yes in the light of the World Cup, then how you have to deploy the people in terms of that. But Marikana, I have testified here that it was the first time that we have an incident like Marikana.
Do you know anybody else who's attended a course along the lines that was suggested in the question?
As I'm saying, all officers that we, at the level of deputies, those that were responsible for the World Cup, there were different courses that we have undergone. And I think head office will be a testimony to that.
When ndiyathemba nabase-head office banganqinelana nami kuba kukhona uqeqesho esalifumana silungiselela ngela xesha bekukhona iWorld Cup kodwa yona isimo yasemarikani ibingenye nje eyodwa nje engafani nezinye.
Major General Mpembe, the training you received for the World Cup around commanding multiple units, did you draw on that training at Marikana?
General, ngokuya ngoku training ngoJohn ilungiselela iWorld Cup ingaba mhlambi kukhona ocaphule kuwo xa usenza lo msebenzi wasemarikana?
Not only in the World Cup, I did present various crowd management that pose a serious problem. And I did indicate that they were still not the same as the one that I handled in Marikana.
Andicaphulanga kwi-World Cup kuphela nakwezinye izehlakalo ezininzi apho bekusetyenzwa ngabantu kodwa eyasemarikana yona ibiyodwa,
which were properly being solved in terms of the experience that one is having. But the one of Marikana was one of its own. And as I've said, it was the combination.
Kwaye ezinye ezizikwazile ukuzilungisa ngohlobo kodwa yona yasemarikana ibingeyodwa nje sicaleni sixubanisa nezinye.
Particularly in the sense that subs to solve, and that's the lesson learned, and the lesson that one has learned even before Marikana, that it does not only rest on the police. The other party, they must bring their side, they must be honest in what they are doing. And then the ultimate outcome will be positive. And as I have indicated with examples that I demonstrated to this commission.
Kwaye nezifundo esasizifumene kwezinye iziganeko ezobesisenza kuzo kuba nelinye iqela kufuneka nalo lithembeke linyaniseke usikwazi ukuba sifumane iziphumo ezamkelekayo.
Major General Mpembe, have you ever been trained on how to disarm a crowd of people in any of your training, whether for World Cup or SABC training? Have you ever been trained on how to disarm a crowd of people?
General, ingaba wakwaqeqesha uba abantu abaninzi bexhobile ubathathela njani izixhobo zabo ngaphandle kokujonga kuWorld Cup kuphela nakwesinye na isimo uba uyakwazi na ukubathathela abantu abaliqela bezixhobo zabo?
The training that one has undergone in 1986, and I did indicate crowd formation, how to disperse the crowd, and in terms of how you also have the crowd psychology, in terms of you will have to divide the crowd to smaller groups, and then you need also, then you can be able to overpower them, the utilization of the tear gas, the stun grenade, to disorientate the people. And in the light of that, one can say yes.
Kuba ndingabheka kuqeqesho ndanilifumene ngalaa nyaka ka-1986 apho abantu uye ubahlakaze bathi xa sebehlukene bengamaqela abancane ubehlule ngamandla usebenzise i-tear gas ne-stun grenade uba uzame ukubaphazamisa engqondweni uzokwazi ukubathalela izixhobo. Ndingavuma ndithi ewe ndinalo qeqesho olunjalo.
Thank you, Major General Mpembe. I understand the training you've had on how to disperse and manage the crowd, but my question was, have you had training specifically on disarming a crowd of people? Not dispersing them, disarming them.
Ndiyayiqonda generally uqeqesho othetha ngalo loba ukuhlakaza abantu kodwa endifuna ukuyiqonda uba kukhona uqeqesho olujonge kanye kanye ekubathatheleni izixhobo beliqela bexhobile.
Chairperson, my answer still remains the same, in the sense that you cannot disarm the people if you don't disperse them.
Mhlala ngaphambili impendulo lami kusekwayileya ngoba awunokwazi ukubathalela izixhobo abantu ungakhange ubahlakaze kuqala.
The question is based on the premise that even if you disperse them, does that necessarily help you to disarm them?
Umbuzo uthi kunoba ubahlakazile ingaba lona ithetha uba uzokwazi ukubathathela izixhobo?
Correct, Chairperson, in the sense that if you isolate them and you concentrate to those that have got arms, and then you can be able to overpower them in terms of the resources that you do have.
Mhlenga phambili ngohlobo loba uba ngaba ukwazile ubahlukanisa ukwazi ukuqaphela uba ngabaphi na abaphethe izixhobo uzokwazi ke uba ubathathele ngolohlobo.
Major General Mpembe, when were you trained in that aspect? You say disperse them, smaller group, and then overpower them to disarm them. When were you trained as to how to do that?
Generally ngaba uqeqeshwe nini ukwenza lento utsho uba uyabahlukanisa babe ngamaqela amancane ubongamele ngamandla ubese ubathathele izixhobo?
Chairperson, I did testify that in 1986, and when we were doing the crowd management, crowd dispersal approach, and taking into account the new legislation, that when the new legislation was enacted and it was brought, the most bigger change, it was the communication, persuasion, mediation that was brought in terms of the new act, and then the dispersal. And I did indicate that there were no much fundamental changes in terms of the training that was done by then and the training that is being done now at the college. But the most emphasis in the crowd is now crowd management.
Njengoba benditshilo ngaphambili ngo-1986 apho sasiqeqeshiwe ngendlela okuphatha ngalo iqela labantu kwaye kwaba khona nemithetho emitsha evelayo nayo ithetha ngoba ngothethathethwano nangokubacenga abantu kwaye nokuzama ukuza nendlela ezinoxolo phakathi kodwa yona isekelo soqeqesho awuzange sitshintshe kangako.
Chairperson, in addition, all what I've said now in terms of communication, persuasion, mediation, negotiation, that approach was definitely employed in Marikana.
Mhlala ngaphambili njengoba ndisitsho nje olohlobo lokuthethathethwano ukubacenga ukuzama ukuxolelanisa ukuthethathethana nabo lezo ndlela zonke zenziwa eMarikana,
which in all instances that it has happened, it was initiated by the police.
Futhi kuwo wonke amaxesha ezo nto zazisenzeka kwakungamapolisa ayekhokhela phambili kuzenze.
Major General, I understand your testimony generally about the approach to disarming, but my question still, it's a yes or no question. Have you received training in how to disarm a crowd? Specifically, how to disarm the crowd? Not disperse them, or manage them, or mediate with them, or negotiate with them and persuade them. But you've talked about how you disarm through overpowering a smaller group of people. Have you received training in how to do that?
Mbuzo wami usemi general undifuna uqonda uba ungaba walifumana uqeqesho na lokuba lubathathele abantu izixhobo. Ndiyayiva leyo uba uqale ngokubehlukanisa ube ngamele ngamandla. Kodwa indlela yokubathathela izixhobo ingaba ikhona indlela enaniqeqesho luba nizobathathela kanjani izixhobo iqela labantu?
Chairperson, my answer will be yes on the basis of the curriculum content presented to me in 1986.
Mhlali ngaphambili nizodi ewe ngokuya ngokwengxelo yoqeqesho enandiyifumene ithunyelwe kimi.
The combination of it is what was presented to me when Regulation 86, Regulation of Gatherings was brought into effect.
Ndlela leyo yayinikezwe ndandiyinikezwe xa kwakusenziwa la myalelo we-Regulation of Gatherings Act.
And what was that training? How were you trained to disarm a crowd of people?
Olo qeqesho lalunjani kwakuthe ubathathela kanjani abantu abaliqela bexhobeni?
Disperse the crowd, and in the process of dispersing the crowd, make sure that the crowd is being isolated and managed in a small manner of people. Then you utilize the equipment that you can utilize. It's the tear gas and it's a stun grenade to disorientate them. utilize the nyalas in terms of making sure that the crowd can be overpowered. And then in terms of that, communication is important to tell now those people, if you have separated them from the bigger crowd, obviously you have taken away what we call crowd psychology or mob psychology. An individual start to think for themselves, and they will hand themselves over to you, or they will drop their weapons, and in that process, then you disarm them.
Indlela eyenza ngayo uqala ngokuba ehlula wathi behlulakane ubenze babe ngamaqela amancane xa bengamaqela abancane kulapho ukusebenzisa khona i-tear gas nama stun grenades uba ubaphazamise ingqondo bangazi ucinga kakuhle usebenzise ukuthethathethwana uthethe nabo kwaba babe nolwazi loba abaseyombumba yeyo bebeyiyo nengqondo yabo bacinge njengamuntu umnye usebenzise inyala uzokwazi ke emveni ngoko uba ubathatheni.
Chairperson, I need also to state that in Marikana, there were different units specifically also meant for that purpose, and which were undergone many other training in terms of that, and that's
mhlale ngaphambili ndifuna nokongeza ukuthi eMarikana kwakukhona amaqela amaninzi abekhona for zona ezonjongo kwaye ayifumene uqeqesho oluninzi uba akwazi ukusebenza ngeqela labantu.
Which other units are you referring to that have specifically been trained in disarming crowds?
Ngawaphi lamaqela uthetha ngawo ayeqeqeshelwe ukuthathela isihlanganala sabantu izixhobo?
It was testified with the roles of the POP, the role of the STF, and also National Intervention Unit.
Njengoba bekuchiwo ayiqela le POP le STF nele NIU.
Now the combination of those units should bring about the required outcome.
Lo maqela ke xa sedibene azokwazi ukwenza ezo ziphumo zilindelekileyo.
As the overall commander at Marikana, how did you plan the disarming of the crowd? How did you think the disarming of the crowd would take place if the plan had proceeded as planned?
Njengocommander owayephethe yonke lanto bisenzeka eMariman wawuhlele kanjani ba izoyenza kanjani into yokuthathela abantu izixhobo?
Chair, evidence has been given that this was never a one-person job. So the premise for the question is inaccurate.
Well, she's entitled to ask what role you played in the planning and what you planned. I don't see any objection to the question. I don't know whether the answer can help us very much, but you can carry on.
But that's not what
the
you
point
asked.
Mr. Rwanda made was that a number of people have been involved in the plan. But you're asking effectively, I think, what his role was or inputs were in that regard. Is that right? Well, if that's what you intended, I suggest you frame it that way.
Chair, let me reformulate. Major General Mpembe, how was the crowd of people at the Kopi to be disarmed?
General ungakuchaza uba abo bantu babedibene pha endulini babezothathelwa kanjani izixhobo zabo?
I'm sorry, we've been here this was extensively dealt with in General Annandale's evidence. What the plan was, I understand the Major General was the overall commander, but it's clear that he had these other people assisting him. There was an exercise which allegedly various inputs were made by various people. So I can understand you asking him what input he made and what his approach was, but the general question you've asked is calculated to elicit the same answers that we've got many times over before. Aren't going to contribute to our work really, are they?
Chair, let me reformulate again. Major General Mpembe, I'm not asking you about the planning process. I'm asking for your understanding. If the plan had been executed, I understand that you intended to disperse the people on the Kopi into smaller, more manageable groups. You then intended to disarm them. very practically, what did you expect of your members on the day? How were they to disarm these smaller groups of people?
General ndiyaqonda ngohlelo uba abo bantu babedibene apho kulonduli babezohlulahlulwa babe sebebangamaqela amancane bakwazi ukuthatha lezi zixhobo zabo kodwa ke wena obukulindele kumaqela iqela elibe liphansi kwakho ubulindele uba benze kanjani xa besenza lona.
Starting first from the dispersal, which I did explain.
Major General, can I just get you to focus? Assume the dispersal has happened. They've been dispersed. People are now in smaller groups. Assume that you've used your disorientation devices. Stun grenades have been used. People are now disoriented. They're in their smaller groups. How were they to be disarmed?
General masithathe ngoba ke ngoku abantu sebehlakaziwe sebengamaqela amancane i-tear gas sesetyenziwe ne-stun grenade ke ngoku nje mase ngamaqela amancane nani izobathathela kanjani isixhobo.
The people will have been isolated and utilizing the nyalas that were available in the group of, as I have testified, from the group of 5 to 10, and they would have been requested by those units and also to disarm them. Others, they could obviously throw the weapons down, and more so, we were not aiming at everybody, only those that were carrying weapons. So that could have happened.
Kwakuzawuthi ke amaqela la bambe babe ngamaqela amancane bengamaqela maybe abantu abahlanu kapho abo bakwinyala bakwazi ke ngoku ubahanqa bakwazi ukuba thetha nabo mhlambe abantu abaphethe izixhobo babezolahla phansi izixhobo sasingajonganga kubantu bonke sasijonge kakhulu kwaba bephethe izixhobo.
Major General Mpembe, I still don't understand practically what would happen. How would your members disarm the people who decided to keep their weapons? They're in their smaller group, they've been disoriented, but they're still holding on to their panga, their spear, their nobkiri, their iron rod. Your members are in their nyalas, or where are they? And very practically, what would you expect them to do to disarm that person?
General, andikayiva kakuhle impendulo yakho. Lamaqela lasemancane se mhlambe ngamaqela amahlanu amalungu amapolisa akhona kwezonyala zawo. Nanizwenza kanjani ukubathathela izixhobo abo babangafuni ukuzibeka phansi?
It could have been in the same way that, as I have explained, once you divide the people in smaller groups, you overpower them.
Ikwangalendlela bendisendichazile uba xa sele uba benze bangamaqela amancane uyakwazi ukubongamela ngamandla.
And by overpower, what do you mean?
Ngokubongamela ngamandla uthetha ukuthini kanye?
More members with different techniques approaching a smaller group.
Amalungu amaninzi amapolisa ngendlela ezininzi abaqeqeshwe ngazo besiya ebantwini abambalwa.
And disarming the protesters.
Kwaye babathathele izixhobo zabo.
And what techniques are you referring to?
Ngawaphi amaqhinga abazobe wasebenzisa?
There are many techniques in terms of arrests with regard to the equipments that they had, and it also depends in terms of what a dangerous weapon that those members they could have, but not taking away any discretion of the members, but overpowering them, and with the resources that they had, that could have happened.
Maqhinga maninzi ke anokusetyenziswa ngamapolisa kubala nezixhobo abenazo ukuzisebenzisa kwaye xa emaninzi enamandla ezongamela abo bambalwa ngamandla asebenze nezo zixhobo zawo.
Major General, let me move on. There were 2 water cannons deployed for use at Marikana on the 16th, correct?
Kwakukhona inkanunu zamanzi zazimbini ezazikhona pha eMarikane ngomhla we-16 ngabe kunjalo?
Correct, Chairperson.
Yabe kunjalo mhlala ngapha.
And am I correct that the water cannon is one of the most important, less lethal means of force available to the SAPs in a crowd management situation?
Ingaba ninyanisile xa ndithi zona ezinkanunu zamanzi zizona ezisebenza kakhulu kwaye zingenabungozi ezisetshenziswa ngamapolisa xa kusetshenziswa ngabantu abayindimbane.
One of them.
Ngenye yazo.
Yes, one of them. Major General, whose decision was it to have 2 water cannons available on the 16th?
General Khawuthi kwawusisigqibo sokuba sikabani sokuba makube izinkanunu ezimbini ezikhona ngalamini.
Not only 2, but they were needed. But we only have 2.
No, the question is who decided we must have water cannons? Send for the water cannons. Let them come to Marikana. Who made that decision?
Umbuzo uthi isigqibo
Normally
sesikabani sokuba
have them in
masise
Rustenburg.
zonkanunu eMarikana.
Chairperson, normally is the decision of both the overall and operational command. And in that
Mr.
case, it was myself
you-
and Brigadier Khalid.
You and Brigadier Khalid decided we need water cannons.
Yes,
So
but
you
but not 2.
No, you sent for water cannons.
Yes,
And how many did you get?
2.
You wanted more, you only got 2. Is that
Yes,
so?
that's right, Chairperson.
Kwakusisigqibo so komanda ophethe konke no komanda obhexishayo owayefune ikanoni kodwa ke bayengafunanga zambini kwakufuneka ezaninzi kodwa bafumana ezimbini kuphela.
Major General, how many water cannons did you want? How many did you ask for?
Wawufuna ezangaphi inkanuni ezo General?
I actually said as many water cannons as we can have that they were there in the subs.
Ndandithe inkanuni ezininzi kangangoko zingafumaneka ezikhona apho ku-SABC.
And why did you want as many water cannons as SAPS has?
Kutheni wafuna inkanuni ezingangokuba zingafumaneka?
Chairperson, it's obvious that when you disperse the groups, they were regrouping somewhere. So the utilization of the water cannon was also one of those reasons.
Kungoba xa uzama ukuhlakaza iqela lihlaka ke liphinde futhi liyondibana kwenye indawo kungalona kwakufuneka zibe liqedlanyana i-water cannons.
Major General, you said you'd like as many as they had. How many, can you give us a number? How many you thought would have been enough? How many water cannons would have been enough on the 16th?
Ngoba uthe uzifuna ngobuninzi bazo ungakusinike nje inani mhlawumbe wawulifuna ngalowo ngomhla we-16.
Chairperson, I've already said that the number that subs could avail to myself, because in terms of the planning of that size, you need also to put the other one in the reserve force.
Njengoba nithile uba mandiniwe ezo zingena ukufumaneka ngobuninzi bazo kuba xa umsebenzi ungakuye kufuneka uba ube khona enye uyibekile izolindela xa mhlawumbe kwenzeka enye into kwenye.
But Major General, let's use hindsight. You know how many people you had to deal with on the 16th. How many water cannons would you have liked on the 16th?
Objection, Chair. Can't ask the witness to use hindsight.
Never been aware of legal authority with the proposition. You can't ask a witness that.
There is,
Have you got a cases that
I'll
say
look it up. It's a Supreme Court of Appeal judgment. I'll look it up, Chair.
yes. That applies the strict rules of evidence. Are they binding on this commission?
You asked me for authority, Chair. If you're going to take it seriously, then I will look for it.
No, seriously,
I know it does exist.
Look at hindsight. I discussed it with General Annandale. Hindsight is helpful because it enables you to discover what went wrong, and moves you on to the next question as to what of the things that went wrong that you didn't foresee were perhaps foreseeable. So I don't think questions based on hindsight are inappropriate. I understand they can get out of hand if there are too many asked, but I think this one's all right, so we'll carry on with this if you don't mind.
May I just say this is a cautionary measure, Chair, that hindsight questions do turn on the conjectural, and the chairperson has already ruled on the conjectural issue, but I'm not going to press the point.
May have to revise that ruling if it says what you said it says. Carry on, Ms. LaRue, but don't trespass too far into the conjectural area, because Mr. Inglewan is right in saying that the further we get into conjecture, the less helpful the answers will be.
Thank you, Chair. So, Major General, knowing how many people you had to deal with on the 16th, so using what you know today, how many water cannons would you have wanted on the 16th?
Ngokwazi kwakho ke General abantu owawuzosebenza ngabo ababehleli pha endulini wawunokufuna zibe ngaphi water cannon uzokwazi ukuqabelisa lo msebenzi.
Chairperson, I've already said that on the 16th itself, I said as many as I can that head office could give me. And that's what I said, and I also having to think that others could be on the reserve. So maybe then with the hindsight, because I've already said that I wanted as many as head office can give.
Njengoba bendichilo ba ndandifuna kangangoko banokwazi ukuninika zona kuba ezinye ndandisho ba kuzoba phaya elindweni xa mhlambi enye isenzeka okunye. So ndiyathi ba uninzi libe ngangoko ndikazifumana.
Major General, I must persist in this.
Sorry, can I ask a question on this point? Now, I take it that you know that head office have got 200 water cannons standing by waiting to be sent to Marikana. Presumably they had a reasonable number, but not excessive. Now, how many did you expect them to send you if they could send all the available ones? You must have had some kind of idea at the back of your head as to how many you thought you might get. Can you tell us that?
Ndikaye ndibuze ngolhlobo ke General mhlambi njengokwazi kwakho ba zikhona iwater cannon ezikhona head office. Mhlambi zazi ngaphi wena uzilindele baba ngakunika zona ngalomini.
Chairperson, answering from the hindsight, as you say, because at that time I know that I had Major General Enendale, who was there, who could be able to tell me whether they were available or not. And as I've said, if I could have another 2, which I can put on the reserve.
You had to deal with 3,000 people. So I can imagine 4 water cannons could usefully have been deployed to deal with the 3,000 people. Is that correct?
With the benefit of the hindsight, yes,
Yeah,
Chairperson.
I mean, you could even manage with 6, I should imagine. That's right.
Chairperson, as I've said, it depends on the situation and where you could use it.
Njengoba uGeneral wayebhekene nabantu abangafika ku-3,000 mhlambi ezine zazingazama ukwenza lo msebenzi.
And Major General, I don't want to detain us too long on something we've touched on, but can you explain to the Commission why you wanted water cannons on the 16th? What role were they going to play in your plan?
General ungakwazi ukuchazela iCommission uba kungani wawufuna iwater cannon zazizokwenzani ngalomhla we-16 iwater cannons?
Chairperson, the water cannon has got various advantages. Advantages in terms of if you utilize it, members can get scared and they become too much wet.
I don't think you mean members. I think you mean
Strikers, yes.
Strikers.
Thanks, Chairperson. And in the process, some of them also, with the benefit of the hindsight, as I answer in the question, some of them you could even see whether they are being marked, and you can be able to arrest them at a later stage. And that is what I had in mind by then. And then the other 2 that I was speaking about is when these others water is finished, then we can push the other 2 in. But what is more important is that you could be able to flush them in a manner that you could actually disperse them, and it encourages the dispersal process.
Using the word flush both literally and metaphorically.
ingamininzi imisebenzi ongayisebenzisela kuzo as water cannon ungakwazi ukuyisebenzisela mhlawumbe ibothuse eloqela lihlangeneyo ungakwazi futhi nokwazi xa usebenzisa izikanoni ukwazi ukubona ukuthi ngobani na ababandikanyana kulikhanqalazo kwaye ezinye ezimbini ezinithetha ngazo ngathi ezizoqala xa ziphelelwa ngamanzi zingene ezimbini ziqhubeleke kwaye kwangaze xa ubathela ngalawo manzi bangakwazi ukutheleka babaleke.
Yes, Chairperson, I just wanted to maybe clarify the word flush, or maybe you have already clarified.
I know what you meant by flush.
Okay, thanks, Chairperson.
Physically drive them away. And
yes.
So metaphorically sort of push them away, as you use the word flush metaphorically and literally.
Thanks, Chairperson.
Here you were doing both at the same time.
Yes, Chairperson, particularly when I'm talking to Human Rights Commission.
It's not really lethal.
Chairperson.
It's not really lethal. It's unpleasant to have a column of water directed at you. So if you had that happen to you, you might well want to turn away and allow yourself to be dispersed. That's the first point. As you said, if it's coloured water, then the persons are identified and it's easy to arrest them afterwards.
Yes, Chairperson. And the other reason, which of course I understand Major General Enendale said that they are still undergoing, looking at it, but also at that time when we were busy with the World Cup, it was that you could pour something that could irritate the protesters. And then when they get irritated, and then they can
I don't think there's any evidence that the water cannons used at Marikana had some fluid which would have that effect. But it could be done, but it wasn't done at Marikana.
Correct, Chairperson. That
we offer for such persons, and then to the right in each year the number of persons that have been trained in that specific course.
Somuntu lowo ikwazi kumkhawuzelelo angaziva kakuhle akwazi ukutshintsha ingqondo kodwa ke zange isetshenziswe emarikane kuba ke siyazibi ngafikeleli kulomgangatho.
Major General, when did you request the water cannons?
Ingaba General wazicela nini ezi water cannon bazisa?
Chairperson, I don't know precisely, but Brigadier Khalid can know. One water cannon is already in the province. But I can find out when precisely the water cannons were requested. But it was before the 16th.
Andinokwazi kakuhle kodwa ndingaqinisekisa uba ikanoni enye ikhona eprovincini kwaye uKhalid angakwazi ukuthi uba izaziye zacelwa nini ezo water cannons.
Thank you, Major General. If you could establish when they were requested, and of whom were they requested? Who did you ask for the water cannons?
Uba ngawazi ukwazi ukuthi ba mhlawumbe zazicelwe nini futhi zazicelwe kubani?
The provincial JOC will require the NAT JOC. So who in the NAT JOC I still have to establish. But the provincial JOC, in that case, I could say Brigadier Khalid with certainty, but who received the request at the NAT JOC? NAT JOC is the national JOC, because we actually work from one JOC to the other. I can establish later.
Ndingaqinisekisa uba ku-provisional JOC uBrigadier Khalid nguye owaya wayenza isicelo xa siya kwi-national JOC andinokwazi ke mhlawumbe basenziwe ngubani okanye kubani isicelo esi kodwa ndingakwazi ukufumana leyo ngcombolo.
Thank you, Major General. If you could follow up in those two inquiries. Do you know when...
Sorry, let me make a point that I think is relevant, not just only in this context, but generally. It's not necessary to ask a witness to make inquiries and come back with the answer. You can send a query to the attorney acting for the SAPS if it's just information that you want, and the information I'm sure will be provided. I can understand in certain circumstances you want a witness to investigate, do something, but it doesn't sound as if it's necessary here. I'm sure that the police attorney is nodding his head. He will get that information for you, and as soon as he gets it, he'll pass it on to you. you don't have to give this witness homework. He's here to give evidence, not to pick up homework assignments as well.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take it up with my colleagues for the SABC. Major General, do you know when the 2 water cannons arrived in Marikana?
General, ngabe uyazi ba ezinkanuni ezimbini zamanzi zafika nini eMarikana?
No, Chairperson.
Andazi mhlala ngaphambili.
Chair, I'll make a request of the SABC team to find that out. Major General, when you requested the water cannons, am I correct that you assumed they would come with people adequately trained to operate them?
Ingaba ninyanisile General xa ndithi xa wawucela ezinkanuni zamanzi wawulindele uba zizoza zinabantu abaqeqeshwe ngokwaneleyo ukuzisebenzisa.
Correct, Chairperson.
Abe kunjalo mhlala.
But with respect to the drivers of what's known as the Johannesburg water cannon, they only received a 2-hour crash course 2 years ago. And that is why we see, for example, in the transcript of the Ryland video, that their erratic driving is cause for some concern. Did you know that the operators of the Johannesburg water cannon had only received a 2-hour crash course 2 years ago and didn't know how to operate the water cannon properly?
I did not know,
Ingaba generals
Chairperson.
ubunolwazi uba abo be Johannesburg water cannon babefumene nje uqeqesho le-hour ezimbini. Ingakho mhlawumbe kwakuthi nokuqhuba kwabo kwawungonelisi kakuhle hle.
Chairperson, I did not know.
Ndandingazi mhlali ngaphambili.
Chair, if I could introduce as a new exhibit the statement by Cedric Leon Fourie.
Kuzawuvezwa istatement sika Cedric Leon njengobungqina.
That one of the documents we got this morning, or one that we have given last
No,
week?
Chair, on Friday.
All right. That's the first document in the bundle that you gave us. You want this to be an exhibit?
Yes, Chair.
Triple H 35, statement.
Chair, 37.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. We had those photographs. I beg your pardon. 37, statement of Warrant Officer Fourie.
That statement relates only to the 2 hours of training that they were given on a particular day in 2012. It says nothing about whether they received training thereafter.
Correct, Chair. Through you, Chair, we don't have any other information at present around training of the water cannon operators of the Johannesburg water cannon, but we do have the Fourie statement in that regard.
The influence being of the other two I need to mention later.
Chair, I don't mean to detain us with the Major General going through the Fourie statement, other than to highlight for the record that in paragraph 5, it's recorded that the following areas were covered in the basic training: filling the water cannon from hydrant, the main control panel, which was then start up and shut down of the water cannon, the operation of the water cannon control panel, the selection between the various pressure modes, the selection between the various pulse modes, the calibration of the water cannon, how to use the water cannon in the calibration if the calibration was not successful, manual mode, how to add water, water and dye, and all three together. the self-defense system and the protection system on the water cannon. On the second page, he states, I covered the on-screen system and the driver's control panel, which controlled the pressure system on the cannon and a word which I can't make out, and so forth. I also covered a brief discussion on the recording system hard drive, due to there being no computer system or software to remove information from the hard drive in the SAP. I then informed them about the safety measure that must be kept by when using the water cannon if need may arise. This entailed not shooting anybody less than 30 meters, no direct shots at people. Then critically at paragraph 7, the training, bracket crash course, from beginning to end took approximately 2 hours due to time restraint. I also informed members that this was not official course and that they would have to attend one when available at Benoni SAP Mechanical School, but none has come to light as far as my knowledge knows. So Major General Mpembe, you didn't have any personal knowledge of whether the operators of the water cannon were adequately trained, did you?
General wawungenalwazi eliphelele uba abo babeqeqesha ezinkanunu babeqeqeshwe ngokwaneleyo na.
Ms. LaRue, this statement in paragraph 2 says that this training took place a year and a half ago, doesn't it?
That's correct, Commissioner.
Your question to the General is whether he knows that thereafter, whether the operators of the water cannon received further training. Is that the question? After this incident, 1.5 years ago, prior to the statement being made?
No, my question is, did Major General Mpembe know whether the operators of the water cannons had received official satisfactory training on how to operate the water cannon, or with respect to the Johannesburg water cannon, only this 2-hour crash course?
Chairperson, I have already said that I did not know. I am not responsible for training, and I'm not responsible for the issuing of equipments, no procurement process. I'm only the end user.
Hlala ngaphambili hayi bendike ndathi nangaphambili uba ayindimi ojongana noxanduva lokuqeqesha okanye ukukhupha izixhobo zokusebenza mna nje ndisekugqibeleni phaya.
Major General, who would decide who would operate the water cannon on the 16th of August? Whose decision was it that those 2 water cannons would be operated by the particular people that did that? Who decides that?
General ngubani othatha isigqibo sokuba iwater cannon ezithile ezoqhutywa ngubani othatha eso sigqibo?
I did explain that when I was testifying about the call-up when you are requesting resources. Every time when a particular resource has been issued, there are people that are supposed to be trained. So it's obvious that those that have been trained will use that. It's not one decision. It's given. It's there in the policy. As I've said, I cannot put any person whom I don't know who's been trained, but the training division or the commanders of where the water cannon will come will decide who operates the water cannon, those that have taken a course. It's not an overall commander's decision, nor an operational commander's decision.
Njengoba benditshina seqala uba xa kubizwa abantu ababizwayo kumsebenzi kuye kuthi iikomanda zabo bantu babizwayo kube ziyo ziqinisekisa uba abo bantu balungele na uba bangabizwa bayowenza lo msebenzi apho.
Major General, if it's true that the 2 operators of the Johannesburg water cannon received no further training other than this 2-hour crash course, and they were deployed to be in charge of what you've said is an important, less lethal technique that's available to you, do you have any comment on that?
Chair, what is the basis for that statement? Because the statement that our learned friend has just referred to nowhere says that that's the only training that is being
Chair, I've
used.
asked him to assume.
Sorry, here's the statement that's been taken by the police, and I take it was on the police hard drive, was it? So presumably someone has been asked to find out when Warrant Officer Dixon, Warrant Officer Creer received their water cannon training. So a statement was obtained and it's been part of the police hard drive. I take it one can assume, at least for the purposes of the assumption that Ms. LaRue wants us to make, that if there was any other training these people would have got, then we'd have had another statement relating to the other training they got. So
No,
in
with
the absence
respect,
of...
with
surely,
respect not, Chair.
well, why would the police have given us a
Sorry,
statement in respect to the training of one part of the training of these people and no statements about any other training if there was training?
Mr. Chairperson, perhaps if I can help my learned friend here. The statement wasn't on the police hard drive. When we were investigating the absence of video camera footage from the SAPS, at a time when there wasn't video camera footage from either water cannon that had been made available, we asked for certain statements relating to that. And why this statement was furnished is that we were informed that, I forget now whether it was Johannesburg or Northwest water cannon operatives, I think it was Northwest, had not been trained in the use of the water cannon, and it was in that context that this batch of statements were furnished to us. So it may not be as... The focus of our inquiry was in relation to video. It wasn't in relation to water cannons generally.
Yeah, the point I made was that if the police have been asked for information about the training of these water cannon operators, and a statement is produced dealing with Messrs. Dix and Creer, who I take it the two involved, and no other statement is produced, then it may not be absolutely clear that that's the only training they got, but it's a fair assumption that if there had been, the police would have provided another statement from somebody else who gave them extra training. So for the purposes of the assumption, and it's no more than that Mr. LaRue's making, I think it's something that I will allow her to ask.
But Chair, the assumption she's making is that the training was about how to drive a water cannon and do other things. As we understanding, the statement was taken purely for purposes of ascertaining whether these persons could operate the video cameras that was mounted on these things.
But I suggest you read paragraph 5. You'll see what the thrust of the statement taking was about. Please carry on, Mr.
I have.
Major General, let me repeat the question. I want you to assume that these two water cannon operators received no further training other than what's set out in the statement by Fourie, and ask you if you have any comment on that lack of training, lack of further training.
I'm sorry, Mr. Roy, I don't understand where you're going to. He said he doesn't know what training they got. He says he ordered some water cannons and he got water cannons and operators. He assumed, as any reasonable Major General would have done, that the water cannons he was sent and the water cannon operators he was sent were in working order and with the necessary training and so on. Now, if this is all the training they got, it's an inference, I take it, that can easily be drawn by anybody. Either they were properly trained or they weren't. I'm not sure he's got any expertise as to what amount of training a water cannon operator needs. And in any event, never mind the training, if they've been working at it for a year and a half, I think it was, one would expect them to have picked up some expertise on the job if they were still there operating the water cannons. So really, this is going to help us too.
Thank you, Chair. Major General, let me reformulate my question. What is your view of how the water cannons performed on the 16th at Marikana?
Were you present when the water cannons performed or failed to perform?
No, Chairperson, I was not there.
Have you got any, based on what you saw yourself, experience yourself, is there any comment you can make about the way the water cannons operate?
No, Chairperson.
General uthi azangabone xa zisebenza ezi water cannon kwaye akho nto angaphawula ngoba zazisebenza kanjani okanye zazingasebenzi kanjani ngaloo mini.
Major General, when you were up in the helicopter, did you observe how the water cannons were being used on the 16th at Marikana?
General, ngeli xesha upha phezulu kwinqwelomoya ingaba ubonile uba i-water cannon ezisetyenziswa kanjani nge-16 eMarikana?
Correct, Chairperson.
Ewe mhlala ngaphambili.
And what did you observe from the helicopter of the water cannons?
Ngabe uqapheleni xa uphezulu kwinqwelo ntaka uba icannon zisebenza kanjani?
I saw when they were pouring water.
Ndibonile ngexesha zithela amanzi.
You see anything from the helicopter that we couldn't see on the videos that were taken showing the water cannons in operation? You've seen the videos which show the water cannons approaching scene 2, and I think in one case there's ordinary water, another one there was coloured water being sprayed on people on the koppie. Did you see anything apart from what we saw on the videos?
No, Chairperson, that's exactly what I'm saying. I only saw when they were pouring water.
General uthi akhono ayibona ngaphandle kwale yabona commission le yonke kwivideo.
We'll take the teardrum.
Sake sithathe ixesha nyana lokuphunga. The commission resumes.
Commission resumes. Major General, you're still under oath. Mr. Roux.
Thank you, Chair. Major General, I want to move to a new point, which the point hasn't been put to you, but I'm going to preface it for you with the aspects that have been covered already in cross-examination, and I don't want to repeat those. It relates to the decision to move to stage 3 on the 16th. You've testified that it was your decision, and I'm not covering that. What I'd like to ask you about, though, is if I can take you to the 13th. The decision to disarm the protesters at the railway line, that was not yours, correct? That was the provincial commissioner.
Isigqibo kubathathela izixhobo abaqhankqalazi ngomhla we-13 phaya ngakwimzila weloliwe kwangeso sigqibo sakho kwangeso sigqibo sekomishina wophondo ingaba kunjalo?
No, Chairperson.
Akunjalo mhlala ngaphambili.
Incorrectly formulated. And my recollection is, I'm looking for it in Exhibit L, my recollection is that the provincial commissioner gave certain instructions which are set out, summarized in slide 44 of Exhibit L, and they're also in the occurrence book. And they included that the dangerous weapons had to be confiscated and the meeting had to be dispersed. But did the instruction include the identification of the place where the disarming was to take place? Your question was the decision to disarm them at the railway line. That was a decision of the provincial commissioner. My understanding is she gave certain instructions, which you see slide 44 and in the occurrence book, but she never identified the place, as I understand it, as being the railway line. Am I correct? So,
with respect, no, Chair. If I could ask you to turn to Exhibit G5, which is the statement by the provincial commissioner. G5.
Uba singayisiye phaya ku G5 kulapho khona istatement somcommissioner wophondo.
And specifically paragraph 11.
Kulomhlati we-11.
For the record, that paragraph states, during the above-mentioned briefing, in brackets JOC, we were shown live footage of a group of men who appeared to be armed with inter alia knobkerries, spears and pangas next to a railway line on their way in the direction of Nkaneng informal settlement. I gave Mpembe instructions to attend to the grouping identified in the footage and made an entry in the occurrence book in the following terms. Gatherings had to be dispersed, dangerous weapons had to be confiscated, persons identified from mine footage who were involved in criminal activities had to be arrested, deployment to key strategic areas had to be enhanced, and members of the police had to act professionally and ensure that peace prevailed. And then in paragraph 12, having given the instruction to Mpembe and made the occurrence book entry as aforementioned, I left for Potchefstroom.
Illustrates the point I put to you is correct. It doesn't say that she said that the dispersal of the gatherings, 11.1.1, and the confiscation of the dangerous weapons, 11.1.2, had to take place at the railway line. The instruction simply was those people whom we see on the footage, they must be disarmed. The gathering must be dispersed, the arms, and they must be disarmed. But they were at the railway line when they were seen in the live footage, but non-constat that the order had to be executed at that spot. So I don't think it's a serious point, but I suggest you redraft the question so that it's accurate.
njengoba ichaza kumhlala ngaphambili uba umyalelo ongatsho uba mabathathele kulaa ndawo okanye phanga kumzila ololiwe kodwa njengoba isithi uba babebonwe ngakumzila ololiwe kwaze kwenziwa icebo loba baze bathathelwe izixhobo ekuhambeni kwexesha.
The question really is the decision to disarm the protesters who were coming back from the Korea mine, and in respect of whom there was live footage which you saw. The decision to disarm them was a decision of the Provincial Commissioner, but it wasn't confined to disarming at a particular place. If you phrase the question that way, I don't think there'll be a problem.
Umyalelo ophume umkomishina wophondo uba kuthathelwe izixhobo kuhlakaza abaqhankqalaza ababesuka ngapha ngawukariyaman kodwa ongatsho umba ndawo nina okanye phanga kumzila ololiwe.
Major General Mpembe, it's correct that it was the Provincial Commissioner's decision that the group seen on the CCTV footage were to be dispersed and their dangerous weapons confiscated, correct?
Ingaba inyani na general uba ngumkomishina wophondo wayekhuphe umyalelo uba abo baqhankqalazi babebonakele kwi video footage leyo ba kufanele bahlakaze bathathele izixhobo.
It was one of the instructions.
Kwangomnye umyalelo yakhe.
And then, Major General Mpembe, if I could ask you to turn to your supplementary statement, which is HH3. Do you have that document?
Correct, Chairperson.
General ngayotsho ngapha ku HH3 statement sakho.
And at paragraph 8 and the second bullet point of paragraph 8, you note that you had concerns that there was no plan on how the disarmament would happen beyond the request by the Provincial Commissioner. So you had a concern that there wasn't a plan, but you went anyway because the Provincial Commissioner had instructed you to attend to the group, correct?
Not correct.
Wawukhathazekile kuba wawungekho cebo loba lonto yayonza njani kodwa waya kuba kwakungumyalezo osuka kuCommissioner Mphondo. uGeneral uthi akunjalo.
Major General, why is that not correct?
Utsho kanjani uba ayiyo lona?
It is not correct to say it was the Provincial Commissioner say disperse without a plan.
Ayingomkomishana wophondo owathi sihlakaza abantu singenacebo la ukwenza lona.
My reasons to go there personally and disperse, I have highlighted them in terms of the emergency and the spontaneous, that it was a spontaneous event.
Izizathu zami ngokunokwami endizichazile uba ukuya phaya kwelo qhankqalazo olwaluyinto esisuka njengesaquphe.
And that it is a duty of the police, particularly on that day, the senior management of the province was called at Lonmin to ensure visibility in the area and to ensure that what has happened on the weekend do not happen again. Constitutionally so correct.
Ingumsebenzi wami njengepolisa kwaye kuba umpolisa elikhulu elomkomishana wophondo wayekhona kulo nginqi. Kwakuye kwenze uba amapolisa abonakale ubukho bawo pha ukwenzela uba into ezenzeke ngempela veki leyo zingaphindi zenzeke.
But Major General, I'm correct that the instruction you received from the Provincial Commissioner is why you left to go and attend to that group then and there.
Ngaba nyanisile General xa ndithi isizathu soba uhambe uye kwelo qela ngoko nangoku kungokuba umkomishina wophondo wayekhuphe umyalelo.
It is correct, but not only that one. There were also others that I should have carried out.
Ewe kunyani kodwa kwakukhona nezinye kwakufanele ndizenzile ndaye ndazenza.
Then, Major General, with respect to the with respect to the overall control, that was shared between the Major Generals and the Provincial Commissioner, correct?
ulalo lapho lalohlulahlule luphethwe ngukomanda ophethe konke ama-general kunye nomkomishina wophondo ingaba kunjalo?
Not correct, Chairperson.
Akunjalo mhlala ngapha.
Why is that not correct?
Well, overall control of what, Chairperson? Is she talking about the operation or is she talking about the hierarchy of the police? I don't understand the question.
I think the question
Overall-
can be formulated more clearly. I think Mr. Ngulwana is right.
Ngicela uMr. Leroux aphinde umbuzo lowo kakuhle.
You can make it clear what exactly you mean by overall command. Overall command what? So I'm sure you can reformulate the question in a way which achieves what you want to achieve, but meets the legitimate objection raised by Mr. Ngulwana.
Major General, let me take you back to the Provincial Commissioner's instruction on the 13th.
Masibuyele pha kulo myalelo kakomishina wophondo ngomhla we-13.
You were the overall commander on the 13th, correct?
Ibingokomanda ophethe konke apha.
Chair, may I make another correction? I think during evidence in chief, the witness amended the word instruction and said it was in fact a request. If necessary, I could refer to a paragraph 7 of Triple H 3.
Umnumzana uNgalwana uthi mayitshintshe lano leya ayingomyalelo kwakusisicelo.
Chair, I'm going to persist and use the word instruction because that's what the Provincial Commissioner uses in her statement, which hasn't yet been amended before this Commission.
You can ask the Provincial Commissioner about it, but I mean, surely this witness changed it in his statement. So.
Major General Mpembe, you were the overall commander on the 13th, correct?
General Mpembe nguwe ukomanda wayephethe konke kwelo hlelo. Kunjani?
Chairperson, according to my statement, Triple G 12, paragraph 7 on page 3, I did stipulate the jock structure. That was not only from the 13th, but until the 16th. But from the 13th.
Njengoba ndichilo kwi-statement sami esingu-Triple G 12 kumhla wesixhenxe uba kwakungemhla we-13 kuphela kwakungumhla we-13 kuyofika kumhla we-16.
But Major General, when the Provincial Commissioner made a request of you, you did what she requested, correct?
Uthe umkomishina wephondo xa isenza isicelo kuwe uye wasamkela isicelo singabe njalo?
Correct, Chairperson.
Abe kunjalo mhlala ngaphambili.
It appears to have been treated as an instruction before you amended your statement, because in Exhibit L, slide 44, the word instructed is used. So it sounds as if the people at Potchefstroom who were responsible for drafting Exhibit L came away with the clear understanding that that was an instruction. It may be that in retrospect, with hindsight, you see it as a request. But at the time, it seems to have been interpreted as being an instruction.
Ukuya ngala xwebhu lika Exhibit L, if bonakalena njengomyalelo, mhlawumbe uye wayitshintsha okanye abantu abe besepotesifum baye bayiqonda njengomyalelo. Ingaba kunjani?
I would agree with that, Chairperson, but myself at that time, knowing that one will have to deal with a complex situation whereby I have also to utilize my own discretion. That's why I took it as a request.
Ndikakuvumelana noko kodwa ukuya ngokwami ngela xesha kuba ndijonga uba into eninzi endijongene nayo ndandiye ndayithatha njengesicelo ngeliya xesha.
Major General, the Commission has received evidence about threats to your life by members on the 13th, after the events that took place on the 13th. In light of those threats by members, did you discuss with the other Major Generals or with the Provincial Commissioner whether your overall command should be shared or given to somebody else in light of the threats against your life by members?
General besike seva pha ukomishini uba emva kwesehlakalo esenzeka ngomhla we-13 amanye amalungu aye ahogisa ngobomi bakho. Ingaba emveni koko uye wathetha nabanye ogeneral na uba amandla ungamele mhlawumbe ningehlulelana ngawo?
Chairperson, I did testify that when I was warned by Lieutenant Colonel Farlam, he didn't tell me who is actually threatening my life.
Mhlala ngaphambili bengendachaza uba xa ndandilumkiswa ngumnumzana uFirmark azange atsho uba ngubani na ohogisa ngokuthatha ubomi bam.
And he did not tell me when are they wanting to take it, but my understanding was that it was at the scene, which I did comply with his request to say, General, you have to leave now. Enter into the Nyala and you go. And I did testify to say that I will just leave immediately after I have handed the scene to Brigadier Van Zyl and Khalid, and that they should also ensure that I put is in. And that did happen.
Njengoba nditshilo emva koko babengachongo noba bayizobuthatha nini ubomi obam. Waye waxa endixelela uba mandihambe ngoko nangoko. Ndatsho ndathi ndizakwazi uhamba emva uba ndinikeze indawo leyo esiganeko kumnumzana uVan Zyl umnumzana uKhalid.
In the light of me having handled the situation of the angry of the members, and nothing happened.
Kukuba ndijongene nesimo seuba ndijongene nawo malungu ayebecaphukile kwazile ukujongana naso.
I couldn't establish how imminent is a threat.
Azange ndikwazi ukubona uba izawukwenzeka ngani kwangoko kangakanani nalo ngozi.
Whether a threat did exist, I don't know.
Uba ngabe kwakukhona ugrogriso lwalukhona nyani na andazi.
The only time when I was informed about the members who were threatening my life, it is when I was in Potchefstroom.
Ixesha endava ngalo ba kunamalungu abegrogisa ngokuthatha ubomi bam kungalamzu ndandisepotchefstroom.
As a Major General in the police and in the circumstances like that, I did discuss it with my Provincial Commissioner. In the light of what I have discussed now, I couldn't see any reason why I couldn't continue. But however, if I was removed, I could go. But as I have explained before, like any other member who has got to fall sick, is either the member himself should say, I cannot continue, or there should be a social worker or a psychologist who has got to say, you are not fit to do the work. Then the Provincial Commissioner could have removed me.
Njengopolisa elinhloko ndaye ndakwazi uba ndiyithethe lonto nomkomishina wophondo. Kwaye uba ngaba kunelunga elinye nelinye na lepolisa elinofika litsho lithi alinokwazi ukuqhubeka nomsebenzi liye likhululwe lihambe. Nami uba ngaba mhlawumbe ndanditshilo ngeyaye ndandiye ndakhululwa.
Major General, if I can just clarify your answer in two respects. The first is, it was only at Potchefstroom that you became aware that the threats to your life were from SAP's members, correct?
Ngokutsho kwakho kusepotchefstroom apho uye weva uba abantu abagrogisa ngokuthatha impilo yakho ngamanye amalungu amapolisa. Ingaba kunjani?
Not becoming aware, informed by Lieutenant Colonel Farlam, not becoming aware, informed. And when he realized that I was with Captain Tupe and as well as Lieutenant Colonel from Merafe, is then that he mentioned that.
Andizange ndazi nje koko ndaziswa nguye uKolonel Farlam xa ebona uba ndino Colonel Tupe no Colonel Merafe. Captain Merafe.
Captain Tupe.
Captain Tupe.
And Lieutenant Colonel.
Lieutenant Colonel Merafe.
And then, Major General, you said that you discussed the threats with the Provincial Commissioner, but you felt that in light of them, you were comfortable continuing as overall commander. When did you have that discussion with the Provincial Commissioner?
General uchaza uba uye wayithetha-thethana nomkomishina uphondo lena kwaye uthi hayi awunangxaki nokuqhubeleka nokwenza umsebenzi. Kwakunini xa uthetha-thethana nomkomishina uphondo?
On the 13th.
Ngomhla we-13.
There's a statement somewhere, General, I can't put my finger on it right now, that says that you were informed on the 13th at the scene that there was some danger to you. Am I mistaken?
Ingabakho statement sitshoyo general uba wawazisiwe ngalo mhla we-13 kuloo ndawo wenze isiganeko uba ubomi bakho busengciphekweni.
Correct, Chairperson. That's when I said it was on the scene itself when Colonel Vermaak said, General, you can't do anything now. Enter into the Nyala, go back to the jock.
Is Lieutenant Colonel Vermaak's statement, G 17, in paragraph 5, he says that some of the members mentioned to him that they were very angry with you because of the members who were dead, and that you were going to lie on the ground together with them because they were going to shoot you. And Colonel Vermaak says he immediately realized it was a very explosive situation. He phoned the Provincial Commissioner, told her of the threat, told her he was going to remove you from the scene, and he says he then went directly to you and informed you that he was going to remove you from the scene weens die dreigement op sy lewe, because of the threat to his life. And then he arranged for an Inyala with 2 members to take you away to the dock. That's what he says in paragraph 5 of that exhibit, G 17. Is that also the way you understand it?
Istatement sikamnumzana Vermaak siyatsho ukuba kwangalo mini wangomhla we-13 ulapho wabona amalungu amanye amapolisa engenelisekanga, kulapho wayewoxelela ugeneral uba ubomi bakhe busengciphekweni makangene kwinyala ahambe. Wayewothetha nomkomishina wophondo, umkomishina wophondo wazomxelela uba ubomi bakhe busengciphekweni.
The only thing, Chairperson, which I added there is that at that time he did not tell me who was actually threatening me.
Into endingayichaza ke mhlali ngaphambili ngelo xesha azange atsho uba ngubani na owayekrokrisa ngokuthatha ubomi bam.
Major General, just one quick point also on the 13th. You have given a lot of evidence already about how you gave no order to the members to block the protesters, to disarm them, or to use tear gas or stun grenades. And Advocate Gumbi took you through pocketbooks and statements that address that topic. I'm not going through them again, but I have one additional pocketbook to place before the Commission. This is by Warrant Officer Tawane from Pop Rustenburg. It's in the pile of new documents that you should have before you.
Kukhona enye pocketbook ezawuveza phambi kwekomishini e-POP Rustenburg kamnumzana Tawane.
It was provided to the commissioners on Friday. This will require yes, this will require an exhibit number.
Me? Well, it's 0 to 1, I think. What page number is it? 29. I see. Yes.
That's correct, Chair.
Yes. I have the habit of hitting the microphones that go turned off. Triple H 38.
Pocket book sipha unumber triple H 38.
The constable. Tawana, was
My
he a
instructions
constable?
are he's a warrant officer.
One of them.
Chair, I'm not objecting yet to the admission of this document. I'm still waiting for the question because this issue has been covered before extensively.
Yes, Chair, and as I indicated, there was one pocketbook that Advocate Gumbi did not put to the Major General. For the sake of completeness, I'm now doing that. It is the pocketbook of Warrant Officer Tawani, and specifically at the top of the page marked 28, it states, General Mpembe instructed members to disarm the warriors and the battle started. Major General, my question is, I understand your evidence that you deny giving such an order, but do you have any explanation? Do you know why 3 captains, 1 lieutenant, 2 warrant officers, and 2 constables claim that you gave these orders? Do you have any understanding of why they've made those statements?
Generally ngabo nolwazi uba lamalunga la ocaptain o warrant officer lieutenant sivtsho uba unike lo myalelo.
Chairperson, I may not be exactly knowing why they were doing that, but my evidence was very clear that I only spoke to the officers. And I indicated to this commission the pocketbook of constable that was actually a female sitting at the jock. And I asked how could I have given her an instruction when I was on the scene.
Anowazi uba kungani na benze londo kodwa ukukhumula kwami ndichilo apha phambi commission ukuthi ndithethe namapolisa
Ask a witness normally why another witness has lied against him. Doesn't very often provide an instructive answer. There are various inferences one can draw. But this witness cannot from his, and he was asked the question last week by Mr. Gumbi. He doesn't know. One can draw one's inferences from the facts, but I'm not sure that it would be proper for him even to explain those inferences himself, unless he has direct knowledge, which he's really told us he hasn't got.
There's a further point, Chair, which is not a concurring observation. The premise for the question is factually incorrect. The statement that was put by Mr. Gumbi to the witness talked in general about an instruction being given. Didn't identify anyone giving that instruction. This pocketbook, if I can call it that, I don't know whether it's a pocketbook or a diary. This pocketbook talks about General Mpembe instructing members to disarm warriors and battle at the battle and so on. The pocketbooks to which Mr. Gumbi referred didn't deal with the same issue.
There are other problems with those entries, which we presumably will deal with later. Anyway, she's asked the question, if he does know, he's learned since Friday why these entries which he says are false were made, then he could have told us, but he doesn't know. So now we know he doesn't know. We can then draw our own inferences from the entries when we analyse them. But, anyway, Mr. Rue, are you going to move on to your next point, or are you going to...
No, Chair, I plan to move on to my next point, but that does require the queuing up of one of the videos and then some time spent on the video.
How long will that take? The reason I ask is that one of the commissioners has a doctor's appointment at 4:15, so I want to adjourn strictly at 4 o'clock. So if you can get the video in before then, fine, otherwise we have a problem.
Chair, I don't think I'll be able to complete the point that relates to the video by 4 o'clock promptly. Could we perhaps adjourn and we'll commence with that promptly at 9 o'clock tomorrow?
Yes, of course, we can see the video now. You can ask the questions tomorrow, or would you prefer to ask the questions immediately after we've seen the video?
Chair, it will be a series of questions as we move through a video clip.
What does the video show?
It's with respect to it's Exhibit Z2 with respect to the events of the 13th.
Is there not another short point you can deal with? I know I'm taking you out of your prepared sequence, but if there is a discrete point that you can deal with now, I'd be grateful. I don't want to waste quarter of an hour. Yes, Major General.
Chairperson, with regard to this pocketbook of Warrant Officer Tawana, at 7:30, he indicated that he was briefed by Lieutenant Colonel Merafe. But he doesn't indicate anywhere where I briefed him or her personally, because I don't know whether he's a man or a female. But he is giving a SITRAP, and a SITRAP is a report that you do normally give to the JOC. So maybe he is the only person who said who gave him that SITRAP, or how did he get the information to give that information to the JOC. So I just wanted to say that is what I can see, what is written on the pocketbook.
Mhlalo ngaphambili ngokuya ngokwepocketbook amnumzana uTawana ebhalwe ngo7:30 uthetha no Lieutenant Colonel Merafe enika ingxelo yesimo uye mhlawumbe ungachaza uba enika lengxelo nje ube ifumene iphi yena.
Chairperson, if I personally briefed the members, he should have said briefing by Major General Mpembe at the time when the briefing was done, and he could have indicated exactly how I did the briefing to them. As I previously indicated, that my briefing include also the high level of tolerance I even use the case of Tatani, but he does not mention it.
Ukuba ngaba kwakundimi wayinika ingxelo ngiwayibhale waqala ngegama elithi briefing abese chaza ke uba ndandibacela kanjani na kuba ndikhumbula kakuhle xa ndandithetha nawo amapolisa ndiwanikeza ingxelo ndandithetha nangonyamezelo olukhulu ekufuneka balibonise ndade ndenza umzekelo ngesiganeko saka Atatana.
Chairperson, I can confirm that the statement of Lieutenant Colonel Merafe specify the briefing that I did to the officers.
Ndingatsho mhlalo ngaphambili nithi istatement sika Lieutenant Colonel Merafe sichaza kakuhle into ingxelo endandiyinikeza amapolisa.
Mr. Roo, I noticed in your bundle you've also got a pocketbook of Sergeant Ebekulu, who is from the National Intervention Unit in Durban. And I don't know whether the sergeant is a lady sergeant or a male sergeant. But on 55, the sergeant deals with the events, the relevant events, on the 13th, and simply says that the strikers were adamant, obviously they wouldn't hand over their weapons and leave peacefully. And the general told the police to escort the miners to the mountain. On the way, the miners attacked 3 ACCU police officials. Are you going to deal with?
Yes, Chair. That statement is in your bundle for another point, but
Not a point you can deal with now.
no, Chair. But there is
All right,
there is a point that I may be able to complete by 4 o'clock that comes out of sequence now. But let me do that.
Well, I'd be grateful if you do that.
Thank you, Chair. Major General Mpembe, I want to take you back to SS3, to the plan. And we know that it indicates that there is a protester group that was considered to be the threat that was under assessment, and that it was identified that there was a smaller group. And in the plan it's referred to as a smaller group who is armed and show a militant attitude. In the statements that have served before the Commission, it's been referred to as a warrior group. But with respect to my question is this. Was there a plan for dealing with this smaller group in the overall group?
Objection, Chair. Mr. Bezos dealt with this issue extensively.
Yes, I know he did, but he got certain answers which he alleged differed from certain of the documents. I think she's entitled to follow up the point as well. The mere fact Mr. Bezos asked questions of another witness doesn't necessarily mean that the question can't be raised again. It's one of the issues that the police have to deal with, and I think Advocate LaRue is entitled to question this witness about it also.
Can I just state, Chair, for the record, that with respect goes against the ruling that you made, because the ruling that you made specifically says on, I'll find the exact word, but it seems to say on a specific issue, on a particular issue. It doesn't say a particular question.
If there's an issue on which there is controversy and various versions are before the Commission, then the mere fact that one counsel has asked one witness on that issue doesn't mean that other counsel can't ask other witnesses about it. So I'm going to let her ask the question. Obviously, we don't want too much repetition, but I'll keep an eye on that. She's promised to finish by 4 o'clock on this point.
Major General, do you recall the question?
General.
Chairperson, may you please repeat the question?
With pleasure. Major General, SS3, the planning documentation that is before this Commission, identifies a smaller group within the larger protester group, and then in the nearly 400 statements that have been provided by the SAPS members, certain of those also refer to a smaller group, some of them refer to it as a warrior group. But in none of those statements, and we have reviewed every single one, is there a plan for how to deal with that smaller group. The plan only talks about the overall group, the group of 3,000. Was there a plan to deal with this smaller group?
General, xa sibheka phaa ku-SS plan, iplan yakhona ibonisa uba kuzoyenza kanjani. Bachaza uba bekungamaqela amabini. Kukhona iqela elikhulu, kube khona iqelanyana elincane ebelixhobile linobudlobongela nobutshantliziyo. Ingaba wakhona cebo lithile na elinani libekile loba nizoyingongamela njani eli qelanyana lincane?
The plan deals for the dispersal, deals with the total number of the group. But what we expected, what will normally happen in a normal crowd management situation, is that when the process of dispersal is taking place, other people will leave voluntarily and the others. But what we did expect is that a certain belligerent group will remain. And in terms of the disarmament after the dispersal has taken place, they will be disarmed.
Icebo esasinalo laluhlakaza wonke lo mdimbane wawulapho kuba sisazi uba xa sekwenziwe kanjalo abanye bazozihambela ngonokwabo, then babe khona abazosalela mhlawumbe abenenkani bangafuni ukulahla izixhobo. Kulapho ke sasijonge khona.
Major General, I asked a different question, which is, was there a plan for dealing with the smaller group identified as being more militant than the larger group? Was there a plan for dealing with that smaller group specifically?
Umbuzo endibuza thina kwakukhona icebo lithile na enani libekile elizojongana nelo qela lalelincane libonakala ingathi linobujoni phakathi?
I did explain extensively in terms of when we were, after the dispersal, what could have happened in terms of also how to disarm that belligerent group. And that's why I'm saying the plan targeted for dispersal purposes, the whole total number of group, but at the end, you normally expected that group to remain.
Bese ndichazile kwakubanzi uba kwakuzothiwa na ukuhlakaza awubani ulindeleke noba emveni kokuzoba khona abo bazosalela abangafuni ukulahla phansi izixhobo kwaye icebo lalikhona uba kuzosetshenziswa kanjani nangabo basaleleyo.
Chairperson, that could also be found in the mission on that plan of the 16th.
Loo nto ingafumana nakwimishini yeplan yange-16.
And also on the operational overview of the 16th.
Kwaye nakwi-operation overview yange-16 iyafumaneka.
Again, Major General, I understand your evidence that once the dispersal operation happened, you thought there would be a belligerent group that would remain, you would disarm those. But my question is, in the plan, there was nothing from before dispersal. There was no plan for dealing with the smaller group that you'd identified as being more militant, was there?
Chair, I must persist in my objection unless the chairperson overrules me. Not only was this issue dealt with Major General Annandale, it was also dealt with this witness by Mr. Madlanga. And I recall specifically referring to various, what do you call it, Exhibit L, not Exhibit L, in the slides in SS3 about where reference is made to the smaller group. So what my learned friend is doing is rehashing ground that has already been extensively covered.
Mr. Lew, it does sound as if Mr. Ngulwana is correct. I remembered Mr. Bezos asking General Annandale about it, and the suggestion was made, the suggestion that you are now putting, we were going to put, was that the police version changed to answer the criticism of Mr. Hendricks, I think it was, Colonel Hendricks, that if they were trying to deal with 3,000 people, they didn't have enough members to deal with them. And the suggestion was made that they changed their story to say that they in fact were intending to act against the 400. But that point was then dealt with by Mr. Madlanga when he cross-examined this witness. So to that extent, Mr. Ngulwana is correct that this has been traversed with this witness by Mr. Madlanga. So on that basis, it is repetition. There's no point in asking the witness a lot of questions which effectively were asked by Mr. Madlanga, because presumably we'll get the same answers. So we are wasting time, I think. But obviously that's a prima facie view. I'm not ruling against you yet. I was giving you a chance to reply, but as the President advised, I think Mr. Ngulwana is right.
Imibuzo le ibuzwa nguMs Luku ufumanise uba ibike yasetshenzwa ngaphambili yabuzwa ngumnumzana uMadlanga ibuzwa kwakuye apha kuGeneral.
Chair, my reading of the evidence is that this particular point has not been put either to General Annandale or to Major General Mpembe. The point being simply the plan identified the smaller group, but there was no plan specifically for dealing with that smaller group.
All right. It's now nearly 4 o'clock. May I suggest we adjourn till 9 tomorrow? You can then get the references, the record upon which you rely, and quote them. And if they bail you out, then I'll allow the question, subject to what Mr. Ngulwana says. But if they don't, I'm afraid I'll rule against you. So we'll take the adjournment at this stage till 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
So qhubeka uqala ngomsongo insimbi yethoba.